Hi there and welcome to the channel, and in this video I'll be talking about Dr. Rana Awdish's 2017 illness narrative, In Shock, My Journey from Death to Recovery and the Redemptive Power of Hope. But before I come on to that, I have two items of channel news I wish to share. Firstly, last Saturday I was interviewed by the wonderful MJ over at her channel, Reading This Life. There's a 2-hour live stream up. I'll link to it in the description below. It contains everything you ever wished to know about the disappointed man but were too afraid to ask. Secondly, as I'm speaking about illness narratives in this video, I should note that my master's thesis, which I have here, is now up online, and it's all about illness narratives. So if anyone is in need of a cure for insomnia, the link is also in the description below. Okay. Let's talk about the book in question, In Shock. In Shock is told from the dual perspective of a patient and a physician, flipping between and blending these perspectives throughout the text, something I'll touch upon in my analysis. But for the purposes of providing a summary, I'll begin with her experiences as a patient and then address how this experience transformed Awdish's understanding of her role as a physician. The book centres on an 8-year period in Awdish's life during which she experienced repeated medical emergencies. The onset of her illness occurred while she was 7 months pregnant with her first child, when she suffered massive bleeding from her liver. This was misdiagnosed as HELLP syndrome, which was an understandable error, as the symptoms match those of this frequently fatal condition which only affects pregnant women. While Awdish barely survived, her baby was sadly delivered stillborn. A year later, having recovered sufficiently to resume her career, Awdish was once again struck down with crippling pain in her abdomen, and it was only then that the true cause of her problem was identified: 2 tumours in her liver. She underwent further major surgery and once again began the arduous process of recovery. A further 2 years later, Awdish fulfilled her goal of becoming pregnant again, but the weakened state of her body precipitated yet another life or death crisis, again during the 7th month of her pregnancy. Only this time both mother and baby came through safely and a son was born. Awdish, however, continued to suffer from the cumulative damage done to her body, and in subsequent years required further treatment and surgery on her lungs, bile duct and abdominal wall before finally achieving a relatively stable and largely pain-free state of existence. Okay, so the second perspective is that of the physician, and this comprises 4 principal aspects. Firstly, Awdish treats herself as her own case, seizing upon any available information, x-rays, lab results, monitors, the remarks of attending physicians, etc., to try and develop a diagnosis and determine the best course of action at each particular moment of her illness, a behaviour that she comes to realise is due to an unhealthy level of anxiety. Secondly, Awdish critiques the care she receives, noting the multiple ways in which hospital procedures and individual doctors and nurses inflict unnecessary harm, both emotional and physical in nature. Thirdly, Awdish reflects on how she herself has been guilty of many of these same failings in the past and traces them back to the way in which doctors are trained. Lastly, Awdish's detailed critique of both herself and others leads to a process of reflection that brings about a profound transformation in how she perceives the role of a physician, and on resuming work, she begins applying her insights to the training of a team of young doctors. She also develops courses and gives presentations to more senior members of the medical profession, leveraging her own experience to advocate for a more empathetic, narrative-based form of care, which is more attentive to the needs of the patient and less single-minded in its focus on fighting disease. The best way to convey the complex interplay of these 2 perspectives, that of the patient and that of the physician, is by way of an example, and this is taken from the opening chapter. Awdish is in the OB triage area, and the doctors are debating the merits of sending her for a CT scan in the hope of identifying the source of her pain, a course of action to which Awdish herself is implacably opposed. "I think it's a mistake to let me travel. I think I'll die if you send me down," I implored them, breathless from the pain. My intuition was validated by my second set of lab results. I'd lost nearly my entire blood volume somewhere in my abdomen. I felt momentarily vindicated, like an eager medical student who'd nailed the diagnosis her superiors had dismissed. I believed they would now see the necessity of operating, of identifying the cause of the intractable pain. Rather, in a squall of black irony, I watched as the values only served to amplify their concern for the baby, and they wheeled a portable ultrasound machine to my bedside. "Bear with me," the obstetrical resident warned, his foot tangling in the cord. "I'm not great at these yet." He didn't need to be. Here I could still be a physician. From the first grainy images, I could see the small ventricles still and pulseless, like a four-chambered pool filling with slowly falling snow. There's no heartbeat. The words cascaded out of me on a torrent of agonized breath. "Can you show me where you see that?" he asked. The words reverberated in the suddenly hollow space behind my eyes. I heard my own gasp and shuddered in a shock of pain. It was as if the subtle movement of my diaphragm with the breath had spread open some barely healed gash, freshly exposing the injury. As my breath caught, I stared at him incredulous. Could I show him how to interpret the ultrasound images of my dead baby? The baby whose impossibly small dresses were still hanging expectantly in the guest room closet. I hadn't gotten around to setting up the baby's room, but she had belongings, small socks and onesies. I'd just begun to prepare. I felt an emptiness begin to envelop me from the inside, a kind of meditative panic. The baby we'd imagined, that was at least transiently, very real and tangible, was dead. I was dying as everyone watched, a room full of doctors and none of them able to grab the yoke to save me from crashing into the sea. "Can you show me where you see that?" I realized the resident's perspective in that moment was aligned squarely on himself. I imagined an alternate reality in which I would reach up from the gurney to trace my index finger around the outline of her perfectly elliptical and utterly motionless heart, delineating the anatomy the way he requested. The insensitivity of what he was asking struck me hard. I felt invisible to him. Hopefully that quote, with its precision, its complexity, and its rich dramatic content, helps throw some light on why I'm so drawn to illness narratives as a subgenre of life writing. I'll now move on to my analysis, which will touch upon 2 points: the type of narration employed and the use of prolepses, or, as they are more commonly known, flash forwards, and how each of these literary devices is tied to the book's key themes of humility and resilience in the face of uncertainty. Drawing on Gerard Genette's terminology, In Shock is an example of interpolated narration, a complex form that combines 2 narrative modes. In the case of her illness, Awdish uses the simultaneous form, so events are recounted as if they are happening now, but she also makes use of subsequent narration, writing from her current position 10 years later to qualify, amplify, and reflect on key aspects of her experience. Awdish moves between these 2 modes thematically, so her account of her illness is punctuated by commentary, a strategy that allows her to draw general lessons from her experience and also to provide the lay reader with the medical knowledge necessary to more fully appreciate the unfolding drama. Employing this approach also reinforces a key theme of the book, humility. Awdish is able to show how both for herself and the doctors treating her, there are always gaps in understanding, regardless of one's expertise, and that a recognition and acknowledgement of this fact is the necessary starting point for a more honest and empathetic relationship between physicians and their patients. By foregrounding the uncertainty with which physicians contend and the provisional nature of the facts they rely upon, Awdish is able to offer criticism without condemnation, but a side effect is that the book is strangely postmodern in places, and its early chapters recalled strongly Thomas Bernhard's Wittgenstein's Nephew, also an illness narrative, which I have made a video about, which shares a similar skepticism with regards to how much of the truth, if any, human beings have access to. The second point I wish to touch upon is how Awdish makes use of prolepsis, also known as flash forward, in her narrative. This device, which, like her switches of narrative mode, she also employs thematically, allows her to connect different points of her story, not only for dramatic effect, but also as a service to the reader, to admit the occasional ray of light into what would otherwise be the unremitting gloom of those sections of her narrative where death appears a distinct possibility. These glimpses of a brighter future also underscore the importance of resilience, and what sustains this resilience is one of the book's key themes: hope. Awdish cautions physicians against discounting the hopes of their patients, however irrational they may appear at times, for when hope is lost, what takes its place is a weary cynicism, which, if left unchecked, threatens to impinge upon the dignity of the patient. So that concludes my analysis. Now I'll just note some of the book's defects, and then it will be time to bid you farewell. So, first and foremost among the flaws of this book is that the quality of the writing steadily declines over its course, the second half being vastly inferior to the first. Now this is going to sound hard-hearted, I know, but the fact is, this book is far more interesting when Awdish is sick. The more sick she is, the more gripping her narrative is. When she recovers, there's really not much to say, and it's as if the author themselves is fretting, panicking over this fact, because we have later chapters that are structured using heavy-handed metaphors, or we have superfluous sections on how she met her husband or her approach to parenting, and the book winds up with a compendium of anecdotes from physicians and patients about their experiences, and basically the whole just fizzles out. Secondly, Awdish has a marked tendency to treat the insight she gains from her illness experience as novel, not just to herself, but to humankind. The most risible example being when she discovers that having people sitting around in a circle discussing their problems can really help them with their emotional well-being. Well, who knew? Also, there is an unpardonable sin of omission, and that is the fact that all of the insights that Awdish has have already been taken and applied by narrative medicine. This is a subfield of the medical humanities. It's a huge interdisciplinary effort that's been going on for many decades and seeks to apply Awdish's insights to the training of doctors and nurses, and I, as a scholar in the medical humanities, am myself a little bit of a part of this effort. So this overlooking of the narrative medicine field really did great with me, and it wouldn't have hurt to include some kind of link to the work of Rita Charan or Elaine Scarry or Eric Cassell at the back of this book. Okay, one more defect, and that would be that in the latter half of the book, Awdish becomes somewhat insufferable. She becomes evangelical in her wish to leverage her experience and basically change the world. You feel as if she's rehearsing a TED talk. And at one point she does make the following comment, without irony it seems, and I did find this absolutely the most amusing moment of the book. Let me read it to you. I took every opportunity to lecture on the importance of empathy. Believe me, by the time you reach that sentence, you've had more than enough lectures on the importance of empathy. So there we have it. Yes, this is a flawed book, but the first half is so well written and truly gripping, and if the second half doesn't quite match its level, never mind, it still has many rewarding insights to offer, and it's full of interesting information about the medical profession. I really did enjoy reading this book. Okay, time to bid you farewell. So until the next time, be safe, be strong, nanu nanu.